I just can't focus on the physical because I'm diabetic. I can't just worry about the depression. I got to have all areas of my life to come into alignment and have balance, or this thing isn't going to work right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey just with that aspect of being an entrepreneur and business owner?
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier that some people are crazy enough to do this. And I think that's kind of where it was for me. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know what I didn't know. So glad now, 15 years later, that we did. Crazy time. My wife was expecting our third child at the time when we launched this. And, she had been a school teacher. And so we were basically down to one income, if you call it an income. It was very, had no idea what I was in for. I just knew that I loved customer service. I loved taking care of the customer. I had a passion to serve. And I knew that there were companies out there that just weren't cutting it. They didn't have the service aspect of things. And one of our taglines is better service, every customer, every time. Something that we want to communicate. We want to live by it. So that's what we talk about.
But that can be lonely, man. I mean, so,
yes.
Tell us a little bit, even about this last year. What you experienced. 15 years in, so it's not like you're new to this. It's not like you're a novice, right? You've been down this road, but some stuff hit you pretty heavy.
Yeah, it did. For the last 2 years, some may not know this, but it got really rough for me. I would go through seasons where days at a time, I would get very depressed and I would have thoughts that were not my thoughts. There were very discouraging thoughts, and it was almost like you hit the play button on the tape recorder, and it just nonstop, the same stuff, repeat after repeat after repeat. And you rebuke them. You say, "I don't want those thoughts. Those are not my thoughts. I want to think on things that are good and holy and just." And it just wasn't working for me. And last 2 years really had an effect. So then things go on, and last summer, things just didn't go as planned, though they were still good with the business. So marketing wasn't working right. Our SEO on our website just wasn't where it needed to be, and we couldn't figure out why. And I was going through what I was going through, so I stopped going out meeting people and selling and promoting the business. And so it just had a negative effect.
So tell me, you've been a Christian like me your whole life. There's a lot of, I guess, confusion, maybe even shame, not knowing what to do with these types of emotions, right? As a believer. Did you wrestle with some of that?
Very much so. Like you said, I grew up in church. I've been a believer for a very long time.
Right.
And it got to be very, it was a deep, dark path that the end of that road wasn't a pretty sight. It wasn't a good place. And so October 26th, it was a Saturday, day before my birthday.
Yeah.
We were headed to a volleyball match on the east side of town, and it just hit me. Nothing happened. There was no argument. My wife and I get along just fine, but it just hit me. And I remember sitting there in a group of people in the bleachers and could not pull myself out of it. That lasted the rest of the year. I never had a break from it. And it took a toll on the family, took a toll on the business.
So just to be clear, you're telling me that your circumstances and your emotions just weren't lining up. It wasn't like the business was plummeting off a cliff. It wasn't like you were dealing with a massive, health issue. It was like you could actually look at the circumstances around you and say, like, this doesn't, my emotions don't match what's going on around me, and I don't know what to do about it. Would that be accurate?
That's a very good way to put it. Yes. When you're in this mindset, at least from what research I've done, I think I'm pretty accurate in saying you become very selfish in this situation because you're thinking about yourself all the time. And so you start seeing the fault in other people. Yeah. And what I found out on this side of health was it wasn't them, it was me. And so I've experienced life now on this side of health that I've never experienced before in my entire life. And that's the good part about this story. There's hope, there's help.
Yeah. What was the transition that started moving you back in a healthy direction?
At some point you deal with this long enough, you just can't take it anymore. I was ready. I had to do something. And so I reached out to a couple of staff pastors at our church, and they recommended that I go see a Christian counselor. And I had done that early on in our marriage when I first moved to town here, and it just didn't go well. And so I did. I got in. I talked to a gentleman, and within 15 minutes, he told me I was clinically depressed. I pushed back on that. I said, I need a few days to think about this.
Yeah.
I called my uncle, and I told him, I said, listen, I feel like I'm about to lose my family, and I feel like I'm about to lose my business. I don't know what's going on, but I can't shake it. Mm. And he was very instrumental, and he told me his story in a real way, a very honest way. Yeah. And he really suggested that I go to the doctor. And so I did. And that was a big deal to have to do that. He prescribed some medication to kind of help stabilize me a little bit, to kind of even things out. And it took 5 weeks for that to really take effect. And it just seemed to get worse. I had a talk with my family, and I said, listen, guys, this is supposed to get better. I just hang on, that things will change.
So Todd, I mean, let's pause there for just a second, because I think there's something really important here. You said you really struggled with going to a doctor. I think a lot of Christians don't quite know what to do with medicine and with a doctor, right? Like, yep. But to me, we shouldn't be surprised that we have these types of problems, and that seeing a doctor should not carry, even for a believer, should not carry the stigma that it seems to carry. How does that resonate with you or your experience?
Eric, you're totally right. I mean, 20 years ago, it was more of an issue, more of a stigma.
Yeah.
And it was for me too. But because my uncle really just broke it down the way you did, he said, I have to have glasses. So I go get a prescription from a doctor.
Yeah.
And it was that simple. And about that same time, I'm going to look over my wall. I had a sign made. It's over here on my office wall. And it says, bringing balance and alignment into all areas of my life: body, soul, mind, and spirit. God revealed to me, I took it that way, that I just can't focus on the physical because I'm diabetic. I can't just worry about the depression. I got to have all areas of my life to come into alignment and have balance, or this thing isn't going to work right.
Wow.
And, the Bible talks about he wants you to be in health and to prosper even as your soul prospers. And so that's kind of what I live by right now.
I guess I want to ask you maybe to talk to, if you were talking to yourself a year ago, right? I mean, what would you share now that, you think other people need to hear?
Eric, it may be different for different folks, but for me, I would have probably gone to the doctor a lot sooner instead of having the weight of what will happen if I do this, or the stigma of that. I probably would have reached out to my uncle a lot sooner than I did. Until somebody's ready, until somebody's hit their rock bottom, and that's different for different people.
Right.
Change, I don't believe, will happen until they're ready. I mean, you can do change a little bit of behavior over here and a bit of behavior here, but until you deal with the soul, the spirit, the inner man, it could be a temporary thing. What I've experienced since all this, when I say this side of health, is life like I've never experienced. The ability to trust God through this coronavirus. I've just had a peace through this whole thing. I've grown stronger. My wife and I are closer. My kids and I are closer through this process. So it allowed me to have the ability to trust God, in my opinion. Somebody listening to this may understand it may be their time, and they connect with what I'm saying.
Right.
And can start making steps. I'm available. If somebody wants to reach out to me and talk, I would love to, but start pursuing some solutions through either medical or your pastor, some Christian counseling. Take some action steps. You just can't sit and do nothing. Isolation, being alone, is not good in a situation at all.